what's going on, parents? Happy Teenager Tuesday. I am back here with Robert Jordan in week 2 of our series, Teens and Technology. Today, we are talking about pornography.
Fun conversation.
Very fun, very exciting. Hopefully this is becoming kind of, honestly, more and more talked about because, and we'll kind of talk about this in here, but the more we have these conversations, the better we get at these conversations. You know, it's kind of one of those learning to dance things and it feels awkward, but if you hopefully have an instructor.
Yeah, once you normalize these things, they become a natural conversation.
Yes, yeah. So hopefully we give you some tips, overarching tips, and then actually we'll give you kind of an acronym at the end that maybe can help in a conversation for you to have with your teenagers, guys and girls, because both are struggling with this. So the first thing on this that I would say is a big deal is to just not be at peace with this being a normal struggle. Meaning like not that people are tempted with it, not to like shame somebody for having the temptation or you know, middle school or high schooler for viewing pornography, looking at scantily clothed people or whatever. So not shaming them in that way, but also as a parent, not saying, it's okay. Everybody struggles with that. It's just going to happen. Especially as Christians. I think this is something that we can start off by saying we may struggle with this, but it doesn't have to chain our children. Everybody is tempted by this, but it doesn't have to become embedded in everybody's story.
Correct. It doesn't have to become that necessary evil.
Exactly. Yeah, that it may be common, but God calls us and leads us to a freedom that is uncommon too. Yeah. So I would first just say believe that they don't have to be trapped in this, in the doing of it. Yeah. Maybe, you know, temptation, sure, but there's a difference between temptation and sin.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the things that we as parents need to do especially is make it more common to talk about sex in our households.
Yeah.
We started very early with our children, and we kind of have this thing that we like to do, and we say we want to talk about sex early, we want to talk about it often, we want to talk about it openly, and we want to talk about it honestly.
Yeah, that's good.
And so we you know, you start age appropriate when they're young, talking about things, and every little step along their journey, you talk about more and more things.
Yes.
And so for us, we've had so many conversations and have even started talking in middle school about pornography and what that is and what that looks like, because we don't want it to have that power that it has from the secretness, the hiddenness.
That's so good.
And so we also want to make sure that we don't just make it a conversation of don'ts.
Yeah.
Like the temptation is there to say, just don't look at it.
Yeah.
Like we want to frame it in this idea that God created sex, that it's a good thing for a man and woman in marriage, that he wants to bless it. And so we want to talk about health in that and what that needs to look like for their future spouse.
Yeah, gosh, that is so good. We actually have, if you go to hopefellowship.net/students, there's kind of a theme here. We have resources that we've made for you. And one of those is like even how to have a conversation about sex and porn. And in there, one of those is we say, don't have a sex talk. Do what you're saying. Yeah. Have conversations about sex. Talk about it often. Talk about it open. And like you said, like make it age appropriate. Everybody asks where babies are made, and as parents, we don't lie to them. We just give them an answer depending on how old they are.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's amazing. Another thing that I would say is something that we're probably more conscious of. I say we don't have kids, but that I've observed parents be more conscious of with first kids versus like second kids is just being cautious about what is on TV and what is in movies. You know, not making it incredibly common to view something that is in a movie with your kids. And even, you know, that does affect us as well as adults.
Absolutely.
So I would just say, like, turn that caution on and don't dim it too much as the oldest kid gets older and then the younger kid is still there. And then you're like, it's okay because now the older kid is here. It seems like there's some kind of give in those areas. So I would just say be cautious.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be cautious because each kid is different and what they can handle and when they can handle it and when it's age appropriate. And so, but we also want to teach them on how to manage that as they're getting older.
Yeah.
And why we're not watching certain shows and why we are watching certain shows. And the last thing I would say, especially when it comes to this discussion of pornography, is I would say don't explode. Like there comes this fear inside of us that sometimes kind of wells up, and then when we discover that our kid may have stumbled into pornography or may looked at something, we want to explode and yell and scream and do all these other things. But I would be very cautious with that.
Yeah.
Yes, there does need to be consequences if they're seeking out some pornography, but we want to make sure the door is still open for conversation.
Yeah,
and
that's really good.
If we just yell and scream, the emotional anger will come out, and they will shut down and stop wanting to have those conversations.
Yeah, even if we don't yell, but they see our freak out on our face.
Yeah.
We're freaked out, you know? Yeah, that's good. Especially if a student comes to the parent.
Yes.
That says, this is something
100%.
At Hope students, we say, if you're struggling with this, the number one best person to talk to is your parents. That's the best person to talk to about this. Like, it just is. And so, like, making it safer to have that conversation is so good. It's so good. Obviously, consequences are different if you catch them versus them coming to you. You know, so on a practical level, what is, I guess, some tools or a way that parents can kind of have a conversation with their student? Again, we have a resource about this, but even just to give an acronym, John Piper kind of made one, which I think is great. We've kind of tweaked it a little bit, but the word anthem, it just gives a way to be able to walk through this with your students. So the first one, the letter A, is just avoid. And again, we're not saying like, you don't say, if you avoid, then you'll never, ever be tempted. You know, it's saying learn to avoid the situations that you are tempted in. And a good scripture to go along with this is 2 Timothy 2:22. Flee from youthful passions and pursue righteousness. You know, like giving them, hey, just avoid it, avoid the situation and being triggered from it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the second part of the anthem is saying no. Whenever a lustful thought does pop into a person's mind, we have a choice on what we're going to do with that. Are we going to entertain it, or are we going to push it away?
Yeah.
And so I think it's ideal that in ourselves and training in our children, we teach them, hey, when that thing happens, you know, say no. Literally say no.
Yeah.
And give that over to Jesus. Give that over to Christ. 2 Timothy 2:22, or excuse me, James 4:7 says, resist the devil and he will flee from you.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to train our kids to do, is resist when those temptations hit.
Yeah, and speaking of training, that's what the T is. The T is even train with your student on this is how to respond to temptation. Like that is a great way, maybe helping them memorize a couple of the scriptures we've just said, the James 4:7, 2 Timothy 2:22, like training them with a response. It's like being prepared for when temptation happens, not expecting that there's a time that we will never be tempted, you know?
Yeah, that doesn't exist.
No, never, no.
The next thing is the H. It's hold, and it's this idea that we need to hold to the promises that we have from Jesus, from God.
Yeah.
The promises that we're not going to face anything that we can't resist, number one. The promises of what he has designed for us in our future life and the plans and all of those things, and keeping that in the proper perspective. Hebrews 2:12 says, fix your eyes on Jesus, and I really do think that's the key.
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. The E is equip. Equip, a little bit like train, but like not only just training for the situation, for when the situation happens, but specifically equipping them with scripture, like we've said. One that is great for young men is Job 31:1. I made a covenant with God not to look lustfully at a young woman. Like that is something that I've embedded in me to be equipped for when that temptation comes.
Yeah. And I would even say with the equip, even giving them little practical things like little pieces of software on their phone or their computers, and teaching them why we
really
have
good.
it.
Yeah.
And the final in that is the M. It stands for move. And it's whenever we have activities that might be leading us, free time that's leading us in a direction that we need to go, it's not always just enough to say no. It's not just enough to reject it, but it's oftentimes we need to replace it with something. So moving in a different direction, giving us an activity that we can do, knowing that when we're wrestling with this, maybe we have a good outlet, going and exercising or working out or doing some of these things that literally moves our mind away from what's going on.
Yeah, that's good. There's something called the law of habits, which is that you can't stop a habit. You can only replace it with another habit. So instead of saying like, stop looking at porn, stop, lustful, whatever, it's like, what am I going to replace it with?
Yeah, it's this reject and replace.
Yes, that's so good. So we hope this conversation has been helpful. Again, this resource as well as others on this topic you can find online. And so it's great. Next week, join us next week. A very interesting topic on gamers.
That's fun.
Yeah, so join us next week. Signing off today.
You can do this, and you're not alone.
Yeah, God's with you, and so are we. Have a great week.